Oh, hello there. Sorry, I didn't see you sneaking up behind me like a scoundrel. But anyway, today we're going to be casting a barbaric eye across this little number. Joe Abercrombie's The Blade Itself, the first book in the First Law trilogy. Now, this book was recommended to me by a friend of the channel, Copper. I was going through a bit of glut of shit books recently, last couple of months. Every single book I read was crap, pretty much. And so I asked for a bit of help, and a number of you reached out and gave me your little gems. I'm slowly working through them, but the first one I tackled was this beast, and I must say right from the get-go, I absolutely loved it. Anyway, we're going to get to that in a moment, but first of all, let's cast our eyes back at the thumbnail that drew you in an erotic way to this video. So, as promised, I've got my tits out for this one. A bit of flesh to titillate your senses. This was just one of many poses I photographed for this video. I won't show you those. I probably won't because they were completely shambolic. This is the best one I could come up with. Now, there are two things that I want you to note. First of all, let's have a closer look at my nipple. Now, this, to my eye, looks like a pizza that you wouldn't want to touch with a 10-foot barge pole, unless, of course, you're a complete pervert. Secondly, I want to draw your attention to my teeth, an example par excellence of the state of British dentistry. In one word, completely fucked. Yes, I've somewhat neglected my teeth, but that is the preoccupation of most British citizens. We don't give two shits for our teeth normally. Plus, it builds character. Incidentally, I'll get to the book in a minute. I just thought I'd give you a little tooth story. I was having a pint with this old chap once. And I was transfixed by his mouth. Now, if you think my teeth are bad, this gentleman's teeth were of another order altogether. One of his teeth, whenever he talked, would be wobbling backwards and forwards. I mean, the thing was, you could have just gone in with a couple of fingers and pulled the bastard out, and yet it was just wobbling around there, and I just couldn't take my eyes off it. So yeah, my teeth haven't quite got to that condition yet, but of course it probably will go that way. So if you ever notice one of my teeth wobbling, let me know and I'll hoik the bastard out. Anyway, right, so yeah, we're talking about a book, of course, today. Apologies, I always ramble. But so yes, as the cover suggests, really, we're dealing with the subgenre of fantasy that's called grimdark. So kind of a bit more gritty, a bit more disturbing, darker than your average fantasy fare, apparently. I don't know when this subgenre was coined, because I've read things in the past that were fantasy and similarly dark. But anyway, now it's called grimdark, apparently. Of course, if we look at the cover as well, we've got the Guardian there. It says delightfully twisted and evil. So yeah, we've got something of a darker variety. Now, in terms of fantasy that I've read in the past, I read most of my fantasy back in my teenage years and into my early 20s. So I worked my way through the Rift Wars saga, Raymond E. Feist, and the spin-off with Jenny Wirtz, the Empire trilogy, perhaps. And of course, Tolkien. I dabbled a little bit with Gemmell. Lots of different things. Of course, Pratchett. All different things. But I stopped reading it maybe in my mid-20s. The only thing I've read in more recent years is Brandon Sanderson's the first book of the Mistborn thing. I didn't really like that. And the two Patrick Rothfuss books, Name of the Wind and Wise Man's Fear. Didn't really like them either. I could get into that another day, but I won't bore you now. So I was reluctant in a way to get back into the old fantasy routine. But when Copper suggested this, I thought, let's just get in there. And yeah, it was quite wonderful. Right, so I've forgotten to put the bloody cover up, but yeah, there's the scan. I don't think there's been many versions of this printed or many different versions of the cover, but if there are any others, I'll stick them up there. So this was first published in the UK in 2006 by Gallant. Now, all I've done in terms of research for this video is look at the Wikipedia page for Mr. Abercrombie, and also one of his interviews on YouTube. It seems a really nice chap. Anyway, so he started writing this back in 2002 at the tender age of 28, the bastard. I mean, it's so bloody good, I can't imagine. And he wrote it in 2 years. So for a book that weighs in at 593 pages, that's quite a tall order in 2 years, even if he was just doing it full time. But I think he was probably working at the same time. So incredible. For me, as an aspiring author myself, my first fantasy book, which was a third that size, probably a third, took me 4 years. So, and the quality of it is it just blows my mind. I can't wait to get on to the second and third books. But anyway, what's this one all about? So I won't go too much into too much detail at this point, but basically it shifts perspectives or viewpoints from 3 main characters in a way, but then there's a couple of more that are added further on into the book. But I'll talk about the 3 main characters. So first of all, we've got Logen Ninefingers, also called the Bloody Nine. And as you can imagine, he's missing a damn finger, and he's this great big hulking barbarian, but not of the sort that you might imagine, like the Conan type. He's quite introspective, quite sensitive, quite a thoughtful chap, despite the fact that he looks, by all accounts, quite horrific. He's covered in scars. He looks like a deadly bastard, and we see some of his early exploits. He's able to dispatch people quite easily, but he does so almost with quite a bit of fear. You know, he's quite a sensitive and quite vulnerable person in some ways, despite the fact that he's great big hulking warrior. So we follow him traveling down from the north, which is where he's from, and winding up in the middle of the map, if you will, where this Union is, the more civilized center of the world. The second person we follow, well, the next 2 people we follow are based within the center. The Agriont, I think is called. So there's this kind of fortified castle which is the seat of the civilization, or the civilized part of the world. So the first one is Captain, what's he called? Captain Jezal Dan Lufa. I always kept thinking Jezal, but that's just because I'm a dirty old bastard. But yeah, this chap is, we follow him at the beginning training for a sword contest, a fencing contest. Not to the death, but to test prowess in that particular discipline. And we find him to be quite an arrogant and self-serving young buck, really. Not very pleasant, but there is beneath the surface, perhaps a better man. So I think we're going to see that teased out as we go along. But in this book, he's pretty much roundly a bastard, I would say. But not evil, just self-serving. And the last character that I'll talk about briefly is Glokta, the Inquisitor. Now, he is by far my favourite character. So in the distant past, he was, well, not too distant, perhaps 10, 14 years, something like that ago, he was a war hero and a former champion of this same sword dueling contest. Unfortunately, in a past war with the Empire of Gurk, he was taken prisoner and tortured for 2 whole years, and it's completely buggered him. He's now crippled. He's in intense pain all the time. One horrible thing they did to him was they slowly removed his teeth with a chisel every day, just chiseling a bit more off. And what they did was they didn't take all of his teeth, but they took the ones that were, say, below one. The ones they would keep, they would take the ones below. The ones they'd keep on the below, they would take the way of the other one. So his teeth are then pressing on gum. I mean, it's a completely evil thing to do. But there we are. He's a very embittered man now, working for the Inquisition in a way. They call them Inquisitors, but they're kind of the strong arm side of the government, if you will, dark deeds, taking people, questioning them, torturing them. So yeah, he's a very fine character. And an interesting thing that Joe does with him is that often it doesn't really happen with the other characters, perhaps with the Bloody Nine, Logen, where you get to read his introspective thoughts. With Glokta, it's all the time and it's in italics. And so it's really funny actually reading his opinions on people, despite the fact that he might be, what the words he's speaking are contrary to his thoughts. I really loved that character. Yeah, so the story itself, or what I'll say of it, is that we encounter these various characters whereby the world is on the brink of war. And so to simplify things greatly, we've got the Union, the civilized centre. In the north, we've got these Northmen, which are analogous to Vikings in a way. Barbaric, a bit more barbaric, bloodthirsty bastards that just go raping and pillaging, basically. And they are growing. They're a growing menace, and they're starting to threaten the outer borders of the Union. Then down in the far south, we've got, again, the Gurkish Empire. A culture that I thought was similar perhaps to the Ottoman Empire. So they carry kind of curved swords like scimitars. Their environment is dry and arid. You get the feeling that it's that kind of is based on that kind of culture, perhaps. Yeah, so, and they also want to wipe out the Union. They want to pay them back for having won the last war. So that's what we've got. And then we follow these various characters within this great game that's being played out. So yeah, I won't say any more about that story, but there will be a little bit more now as I talk about what I liked and what I didn't like about this book. So the first thing I want to talk about is the characters, which really make this book great. It's all about the characters. They're so well realised. They're living, breathing entities, and they're so different from each other. That's quite a thing to do. And it's largely accomplished through dialogue, which is absolutely wonderful, I think. They all have their own manner of speaking, their own kind of knowledge that they're drawing on. Sometimes in this kind of fiction, the dialogue can be cheesy or superficial or not really of the time. I mean, of course, this is a fantasy. It's not of our world, but I hate it when colloquialisms of our time or our culture, our understanding of the world gets fed into a book like this. This doesn't happen at all. You feel as though these people have lived this place. They've grown up there. They understand the world the way it works based on what they know. And it's so bloody great. Another thing that's really good is, I suppose it comes into the world building side of things, but Joe Abercrombie seems to have a wonderful understanding of basic political structure, especially as it pertains to this kind of, especially at the Agriont, if that's how you pronounce it, the wheeling and dealing that's done behind the scenes. It's really, really interesting, but in lesser hands is just done terribly. I'm going to bring up Brandon Sanderson here. I've only read one of his books. What is it? Mistborn, the first of the Mistborn. And despite having a wonderful bad guy and quite an interesting magical system, the rest of it was just so childish. I couldn't believe how stupid some of that was. But this is another level higher. I mean, it's just incredibly well done. And it taught me things about political structure in this kind of more medieval feudal system, and like levying lords levying their people to fight in wars, things like that. I don't really know too much about that kind of thing. The fantasy I've read in the past is a bit more basic in those terms. So yeah, incredible stuff. Oh, you fuck. Bloody door went. New books. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Anyway, Right, where was I? Right, so the last thing I want to say about that I think, sorry, I keep thinking I've got a nosebleed because I had to fight the bastard out there to get the books off him. Um, the last thing I would like to talk about is the notion of magic in this. So, what I said about Brandon Sanderson, he likes to use like a hard system, so set of rules kind of thing. Joe Abercrombie, apparently, it doesn't have that. I mean, if there is a system that governs the use of magic, I don't know what it is based on this first book. The other thing is that magic and the notion of magicians that are in this book referred to as magi, they are a kind of almost mythical entity that may or may not still exist. So back in the Agriont, in the seat of civilization, the notion of magic has kind of been lost, I suppose. They've fallen back on technology rather and science. And so when we encounter one of these magi, however you pronounce that, I don't know. It's so wonderful because it's like this very rare thing. I like it when it's a rarefied resource, if you will. I mean, over the last book I wrote myself, that the comedy Brown Road Blues. Magic's all over the fucking place in that, but I like it when it's a finite thing, and also the notion that magic in this world is slowly disappearing, it's dissipating. So I like that side of it as well. The first magician really that we encounter is called Bayaz. Bayaz, I think it is. He's called the first of the Magi. And so Logen, Nine Fingers, he goes to find him basically right near the beginning. And he's so understated. He doesn't look like a magician. In fact, Logen at the beginning thinks he's a butcher because he's just been butchering a goat or something. And he just looks like a normal person. But the first time you see him do something, it's so understated. And it makes it more impressive almost, if you know what I mean. It's better than someone sticking their hands out and a load of fucking fire coming out or something. This is more a feeling. It alters the tone. It alters the mood of people around him when he does something. Really, really good stuff. Okay, so yeah, I don't want to go on and on about what I loved about this book. So I'll keep that there, if you will. The things I didn't like are very minor, superficial things, but I'll list them and see what you think. So the first thing that I was annoyed about was the fact they didn't have a map. And so Copper was talking to me about this when he was a younger gentleman, shall we say, and perhaps a teenager. He wrote to Joe Abercrombie saying, "Why isn't there a map?" And he actually replied to him saying that he didn't because he thought it would be too hard to create, because when he wrote the book he didn't have a map in mind. So he was worried that the different places wouldn't tally. So he neglected to put it in. But in later copies or later publications, there is now a map. But saying that, I love maps at the beginning of fantasy books. I love looking where everything is and having that world view in my mind. But at the same time, I managed perfectly well without it. So perhaps it doesn't need one. Sacrilege to say that, but maybe it doesn't. Okay, another thing was a little bit of repetition. So this is forgivable, I think, when it's a book this large. But things that characters do occasionally, like sucking their teeth, when they're thinking, or when they're scared, they get a sour taste in their mouth, swallowing, spitting. There's a lot of that going on, but that's forgivable for sure. A fly just came in here, you bastard. I fucking hate flies. Okay, the other thing, this is a larger criticism, but it still didn't bother me because I devoured the book. I absolutely loved it. But for a book that is so large, very little happens. This is mostly really to show you the main players in the story, I think. To show you the world, a little bit of how it works, the political structure, the notion of magic being on the outer fringes of everything, and impending war. The main players, what they're going to do, what they're potentially going to go and do, So it's almost like gathering your party for a quest. That's the whole book. So in terms of things happening, not a great deal. This probably covers a span of just a few weeks, perhaps, and no more. So that's, yeah, something to bear in mind. But I didn't mind. It was bloody lovely. Okay, the last thing I'll say, I mean, I've put it here as a criticism, but it's not really a criticism as such, really. It's just an idea I've got about his writing, in that I know that he has been and probably is still an avid gamer. And a little bit of that seemed to be worked into the story. And one thing that really crystallized this idea in my head was a part where some of the characters explore this building, this great big tower called the House of the Maker. And it's been made, it was created hundreds of years in the past. This great big thing that towers over everything else in the Agriont. And has obviously been made using magical means. So this maker, he was the ultimate wizard, I suppose, in the past. This building has been locked off for hundreds of years. Locked, in fact, by Beaz, the first of the Magi. And he ends up opening it again. And so this whole notion about a building being unlockable suddenly seemed like a gaming mechanic. And in fact, the exploration of that building, it felt gamery, if you will. The way things, the mechanics of it, the way what they see, the way things move, there's mechanisms. It felt gamery, if you know what I mean. Perhaps that's my imagination, my foreknowledge that he is a gamer, but I picked up on that. But it wasn't detrimental to the story itself. Anyway, let's stop there. I tell you, this has been an absolute shambles recording this today. Right, let's get the book down. Right, what shall I give it out of 5? I'm only going to give this 5 out of 5. Of course it's 5 out of 5. Yeah, it's a beauty. Best book I've read this year. For sure. I think it might be the only book I've given 5 stars this year. I can't remember. Pretty sure it is, though. I will read the second and third parts, and there's a load of other books to follow. That's the only thing that puts me off. These books are big buggers, but I don't mind a big book if it's this good. Another thing I forgot to mention is that, see, I mentioned this in the book haul, the last video. I like to fold over the pages to register my progress through a book. I've always been a slow reader. I used to be a very reluctant reader because of various problems, perhaps mild dyslexia. I had problems with my eyes, undiagnosed short-sightedness as a child. So it took me ages to be able to get to read a book. So the first time I ever finished a book, I think it was either an Enid Blyton book, or I think it might have been John Wyndham's The Day of the Triffids. I was quite old at this point. I mean, we're talking maybe 13, 14 years old. So I was a late starter. But I've always felt this feeling of accomplishment whenever I finish a book. I get it now. When I finished this, my goodness, I felt elated. But not just because it had been a wonderful book, but just because I was able to finish it. It's a crazy idea, isn't it? Now, at the ripe old age of 44, that I'm still rejoicing at the ability to finish a book. But there we are. It's not gone away. And so, yeah, I like on a thicker book like that, I have to record my passage through the book to give me some encouragement to keep on going. It sounds ridiculous, but that's what I do. Anyway. Yeah, I'm going to finish. I will read the others, but I'll intersperse it with some other books. I'm currently reading Freaky Deaky. Leonard, what's he called? I can't remember his name, but it was recommended to me. I will be reviewing that soon, and I'm absolutely loving it. Quentin Tarantino is a big fan, apparently. Nucky Nelson recommended this. Completely different, of course, to what I've just read, but I love just swapping around, reading different stuff. But I will be back on the science fiction soon, so those of you who only watch me for the science fiction, don't worry, I'm not neglecting you. I will be back on it. Yes, okay, right, so I'll be back next time with some reviews. In fact, I've got 10 other books that I read, some shit ones, that I'm going to review. I'm going to clump them together in triples and we're going to go through them that way. But anyway, until next time, my dear friends, I'll bid you good day. I hope you've had a lovely week, and I will be back soon with someone else. Anyway, cheerio. Cheers. Christ.